had 6 falls in 2 weeks. The sight that my mum was greeted with when she got there that morning was horrific. She had dried blood on her face. Her arm was in plaster because of the broken wrist from the earlier fall the week before. The plaster cast was saturated in her blood.
There was 2 staff members who were night staff who were hitting him on the head, and he was there 18 months before we found out that he was being abused.
I was doing FaceTime calls every day, and about 3 days later went to reposition her right arm, and she just picked it up like this and put it down. And so I reported that, and they checked and they said, no, she's not had a stroke, but she's obviously damaged her right arm, and she was right-handed. Until I reported it, nobody had noticed. So that meant all the things that she was doing independently, she could no longer do, and nobody noticed.
My mother suffered bruising, lacerations, black eye, cuts, unexplained.
One of the nurses had asked me to move him over to his side because they were doing a physical observations on him. On his bottom, he had the most biggest pressure sore you can imagine, and it was you could see his bone through the pressure sore. He then developed sepsis, and that's what we understand has killed him, was the sepsis. I just think that there's a national crisis in care.
You've got this plague of unexplained injuries that should not be happening in the sector. It should be eradicated, and we know the answer to how that can be.
So my nan, her name was Ellen White, but she was Nanny White to all of us. Really good relationship and memories. She loved music, she loved singing. She really was a character. Something that would happen 5 minutes ago she wouldn't remember, but she could remember something from 30, 40 years ago, or when she was a child. Music and songs and words to songs she would remember. Anything else, you would have to keep explaining it to her. We came to the decision that really she needed to be somewhere where there was going to be some care. I mean, if you're putting your trust in someone to care for a loved one, you would expect that they're going to do their job. You know, she had 6 falls in 2 weeks. The sight that my mum was greeted with when she got there that morning was horrific. She had dried blood on her face. Her arm was in plaster because of the broken wrist from the earlier fall the week before. The plaster cast was saturated in her blood. The carers couldn't tell the paramedics anything about my nan. If the correct procedures had been put in place at fall 1, we wouldn't have got to fall 6. We would have had her for another couple of years.
Care campaign I set up about 12 years ago when my mother experienced neglect in care. When I first initially set up the organisation, we were contacted more and more by families that were reporting unexplained injuries, unexplained events, and some of these injuries were horrific.
Jane was a godsend. Without Jane, I would have been sort of lost.
I reached out to Jane, who was extremely empathetic and a really good listener to help me to process what had happened to my uncle.
She's just a very intelligent woman who knows the ropes, and so she can go head to head to ensure that everything is done right.
In care homes, we want to see safety monitoring implemented choice-led. I would say unexplained injuries, if it were happening in nurseries, there would be an absolute public outcry. More so in the early days, I used to get told, well, we don't want cameras, you know, people's privacy, their dignity, but what people fail to realise is where's the dignity when somebody is on the floor, covered head to foot with blood, injuries, that loved ones are unrecognisable. Where's the dignity in that?
A number of years back now, Three Rivers was having some difficulties then with quality standards within the care home. I had been with the company a long time and working in our Portadown home, which had a certain level of standard, and my job really was to come here and try and replicate some of that. There was a long-term staff and complement here who really, I suppose, due to sort of lack of robust management, you know, were really doing what they wanted and not really always acting in the residents' best interests. Obviously, there was a lot of issues evident, and one of the things that really, I suppose, stood out just and having the ability to get the cameras in was really the need for that, because we couldn't see what was going on behind closed doors.
Your nurses always have to do their checks on their control drugs, which would include morphine, twice a day. If there was an error in the quantity of that medication, again, you've only somebody's word and the paperwork to go by. Whereas with the cameras, if there's an error at all, we can go on, request the footage and say, look, can you look and see which two staff member checked this? You know, and we can hear them count and we can see what they're doing to see if there was a discrepancy at that time.
There are enormous challenges around unexplained injuries. Safety monitoring, I think, has a huge role to play in enabling us to understand what has happened and to work backwards and say, this happened, these were the contributing factors, and then this is how we're going to change practice to make sure these things don't happen again.
Essentially, we install cameras and we use camera technology to retrospectively review footage that has been previously recorded. It's not all of the footage that's recorded, it's normally just a small percentage. But we will review that, making sure that specific care activities are exactly where they should be when it comes to quality care standards. So most often we'll take a look at the likes of supported meal times, moving and handling practices, the administration of medications. We'll make sure that overnight welfare checks happen to the timescale that they're supposed to happen. And then we can also reactively take a look at when there's been an event that has happened, but perhaps the home need a bit more clarity on it. So big ones with that would tend to be the unwitnessed falls or unexplained injuries.
They could have measures like this in place, the alarm mat and the crash mat to prevent injury and early alert systems, but that will not tell us exactly what happened when they got out of bed, whereas the footage will let us see exactly that, oh, they rolled out of bed or they stood up and they fell out of bed.
That enables me to actually understand, right, did the resident get up and knock their side table, for example, you know, their bedside table. And what we can do, we can then relocate the bedside table because that's actually in the pathway of that particular resident. And that's part of what you get from independent monitoring. You can see things that I would have missed, potentially could have missed, or a home could have missed because they didn't have access to that information. And this is the thing with independent monitoring, it's not about just abuse. And I think this is where the misconception comes from. It's about enhancing the quality of life.
Knowing what Care Protect can provide to a care home, I personally feel as though a lot of care home managers must waste a huge amount of time investigating circumstances whereby they are never going to know what the answer is. They're never going to be able to explain to a family member why Mr. Jones ended up falling in the middle of the night and fracturing his hip. They're not going to know. It needs to be an individual assessment based on that person as to if they were subject of mistreatment or harm, could they be relied upon to inform others?
The reason that my son ended up in the care system was because of failings of the school system, whereby he had been to 3 schools before he went there, which were schools that couldn't meet his needs. He's autistic and he also has severe learning difficulties. They felt that residential schooling would be the best option for him, which originally I was completely against. I didn't want him to go to residential and he was only 13. We went to see a school that had been recommended to me, had their own swimming pool, playgrounds, all these things that he could be safe at. It had a great reputation and that's how we ended up sending him there. I was very much advised that it would give him the opportunity to spread his wings, and it wasn't easy to make that decision, but we felt that would definitely be the right one. But if you haven't got the right staff working with young people who are vulnerable, then it doesn't matter what facilities you've got, because he was there 18 months before we found out that he was being abused. We started to notice that he was hitting himself on the top of the head like this, which is a behaviour he's not done before. And he then went on to explain, long story short, that there was 2 staff members who were night staff who were hitting him on the head. And over time we heard him repeating things that had been said to him, and he would reenact the abuse as well once he was living with us. And then he came home with a handprint on his back, and that was when we removed him fully from there. Places with autistic people, if you say you didn't do it, then you didn't do it. So unless it's caught on camera, or if nobody's willing to report it, then you will get away with it. If you're saying that you can't investigate for them reasons, then you must have an alternative. You can't just say, so hard luck, that's the end of it. There has to be an alternative.
Nothing's changed. This all happened nearly 8 years ago to my nan. I don't see any improvements. I don't see any changes. What has got to happen to make these changes happen? We keep getting promised that changes will be made, but nothing actually happens.
More often than not, we're told we don't know what happened and it's a lessons learned outcome. I think we have to go back and say, if that was a child in a nursery, would we accept, well, it's lessons learned? No, none of us would, because ultimately we don't know what happened if it's not witnessed.
There was a very well known, very well covered case of abuse at a place called Muckamore Abbey in Northern Ireland.
The enormity of what happened at Muckamore Abbey Hospital makes it the largest adult safeguarding case of its kind. Today, police said that CCTV footage has revealed 1,500 crimes of mental and physical abuse took place on just one ward.
A lot of the criminal proceedings that came from that were after cameras which were believed to have been turned off were actually turned on, and it was after the footage from that was found. Now, that was a camera system that was installed and it was self-managed, which is a bit like a pupil marking their own homework. And it's a little bit painful to think that there are many people who were there who lived in a toxic environment and underwent some horrendous circumstances that were entirely preventable. If the footage from those circumstances had been reviewed by an independent specialist company like Care Protect, then we could have stopped that from ever happening. And it's only through lack of guidance from the regulator that that can still continue to happen.
Dad had to go into care because he was living with dementia and he was no longer safe to live at home by himself. I expected specialist dementia care that could meet all of my dad's physical needs, mental needs and emotional well-being needs.
What did he get?
Serious neglect, abuse. He was being left in an incontinence pad for in excess of 12 hours, never taken to the toilet.
What are you doing? I'm training it up. It's a lot of food, okay?
Food placed out of reach, spilling hot porridge on himself. And this is something that I was utterly shocked at when I saw. I didn't expect that the abuse and neglect would be on that level.
You can go to state field policy. Not your mom. Open and taking.
An hour and 20 minutes later, after that interaction, his door was opened and a male walked into his room. This male is a housekeeper. He's not a member of the care team. And he was followed by the same carer that had made what I perceive and believe to be threats to my father. He grabbed hold of my dad's wrist. My dad tried to fight him off and he pinned my dad to the bed. He pinned him to the bed. And the carer retorted,
I told you I'm calling the man. Don't leave me alone.
The individual who I consider was abusing my father, he was observed on a hidden camera to poke my father with a walking stick, swear at him, shout at him, walk up to his bed with a clenched fist, blocking him with the sole purpose of putting his hands on my dad's footboard and violently shaking the bed. I just want to see better care. I'm quite a simple-minded person. I'm not looking for anything spectacular. I just want to see people treated with basic dignity and respect. I want people to get washed if they need washed. I want people to get fed if they need fed. We've kind of gone past the point of asking for basic needs to be met. We are 11 years in since the massive scandal years and years ago, a care home for people with learning disabilities where there was horrific levels of abuse and neglect going on. That was back in 2011 that was exposed, and we were promised as the UK that nothing like that would ever happen again. In my research, I found over 30 care homes in Scotland, in England, in Wales, where it has happened again. And of those 30, every single one of them have been exposed either by a hidden camera placed by a family member or by mainstream media conducting an undercover expose, which again speaks volumes. This is why we need cameras in care homes.
We have all too often been asked to start working with a home where they have had a significant event happen. Some homes where it has been an awful case of abuse. The one home that I'm specifically thinking of, we did a little piece of analysis after working with them for 1 year. And we took a look at the first 3 months from that first year. We then took a look at the same incidents, the same numbers, or the same types of incidents in the last 3 months. And it was over a 60% reduction. So basically 60% of those occasions where harm either did come to a resident or there was a risk of harm to the resident had reduced. Didn't happen anymore.
I first came into, I suppose, connection with independent monitoring when I was brought in, unfortunately, when something went wrong in one of our homes. We were exploring options to look at how we could put in new measures to better safeguard residents. We ran a pilot for 18 months. Initially there was resistance because it's new. No one likes change, but after we spent time educating the team members about what the true essence of independent monitoring was about, it was welcomed very, very positively. We saw a significant reduction in Section 42s when we ran the pilot. We saw a significant reduction in safeguardings. We were able to identify the cause of any problems. And what we found was that the team members became more confident because they knew there was transparency. They could go in and do their jobs the right way. We captured some fantastic interactions that we could then share. It became the place where actually I sent team members to go and learn from. And that gives you an idea of the transition. You know, we put in independent monitoring, and that became the hub of excellence for the company.
Mum walks a lot. You know, she's very independent. She walks with a Zimmer. Obviously, they can't be there all the time. You know, and there's been unwitnessed falls in Mum's bedroom. I've given permission for a camera to be in Mum's room so that they can look back and see how exactly that happened.
I've watched documentaries over in England the way people are being treated. One woman, the person that was looking after her was eating her food and washing her in cold water and all that there, and hitting her with the face cloth and everything in it.
And if anything like that ever happened here, it would be caught on camera?
Yep. The cameras are 100%, I think, myself. You know, I'm glad they're there.
So when we had to switch the cameras off, there was an uproar from all our team members and our relatives. Team members, they felt exposed. They felt like that safety net had gone, but more importantly, they weren't able to learn as much about their residents as they could. And that's very demotivating because it's a way to support our residents. And our relatives felt quite let down by the fact we had to switch them off, because for them it was a safeguard that they had chosen to do. But also what happened is it led to an increase of covert cameras by families. With independent monitoring, you've got experts, specialists, analysing the information who can pick up on signs, small or big, that actually safeguard the residents. But also with independent monitoring, they're also accountable and they have a duty of care. So if they find something, and actually if the providers don't do something with that information, independent monitoring have a duty of care to escalate that.
We hold up the mirror and they go, all right, I should change that, or I can modify this, or I can adapt that. You know, that's all we're doing. We're not actually there to criticise as such. We're holding the mirror up to them and saying, you know, you need to take a wee look at this and make a change. Or equally, you're holding the mirror up and saying, you're absolutely fantastic, absolutely fantastic, and you should be applauded for that. So that's all to say. It's not always to see if the cameras are, you know, a negative thing or that they're there to undermine staff. That's not our job. Our job is to support them, work with them.
When you're older, would you go into a home without cameras?
I think because of our knowledge, maybe, because of our nursing knowledge, because of our camera knowledge, I suppose you'd have to say what level my dementia was on, you know, but I honestly think the bottom line is that cameras are a good thing. Even a simple thing, and we have had this before, you fall and the family come in and they see you with bruises. You can say, I can show you the footage to show you exactly what happened. Your family member wasn't abused, they weren't hit. There's actually the clip that shows you what happened. That the wee soul maybe got out of bed, lost their balance and fell. Something as simple as that, tidied up immediately because you have a camera footage to show for it. So yeah, I think cameras should be standard. Do you see on the news and so on the number of families who have put in hidden cameras and discovered that their family member has not been treated well? In fact, they've been treated very, very badly.
So you can't make that assumption just because somebody is in a care home that they're being looked after properly. That's not the case. Thankfully, in a lot of times it is, but it's not always the case. And all you need is one person who isn't doing their job. It's as simple as that.
We're trying to give them a voice that a lot of people don't currently have. And yet those people who are charged with being responsible for their safety, those in the CQC and those who work as best interest assessors from a local authority, to just take a blanket approach and say those cameras need to be turned off, despite the fact that you're telling us these have improved care. I feel as though it is only a matter of time before an occurrence happens where cameras are instructed to be turned off and something happens to that resident. And family members who were fully supportive of having camera in place, independently reviewed by us, then take that individual for negligence to court. It will happen if the CQC don't understand that they need to engage, need to understand, and need to provide absolutely clear protocols on how safety monitoring could and should be implemented.